What if the next global war doesn't start with missiles, but with a software update? What if the greatest shift in world power isn't happening on the battlefield, but inside of data centers and algorithms that quietly shape how nations think, govern, and even define the truth? Across the globe, powerful nations are racing to control artificial intelligence while rogue actors find ways to exploit it. And here in the West, we're embedding it into every part of life faster than we can even understand the consequences. Progress or the start of a new Cold War? Today's guest is here to talk about all of this and more right now. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Skywatch Television. I'm Joe Ardis Horn. Today, we have a completely explosive surprise for you. But before we dive into today's discussion, let me introduce who's here. He's an expert on national security and foreign affairs whose services included working on multinational programs for the Department of the Army at the Pentagon and recently completed studies in generative AI at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. Please welcome Lieutenant Colonel Robert Maginnis. It's time to do it again, Bob. We're so glad that you're here. I just want to say at the onset of the program, who do we turn to when the Middle East is on fire, when geopolitics are consuming all of the national narrative? Who do we call on for true life analysis from a biblical worldview of what is happening all around the globe? Bob Maginnis.
That's right.
Now, Bob, I want to introduce your brand new book to the audience at home and those live in attendance. I want to bring this up on the screen for you right now as I read the subtitle. The book is called The New AI Cold War, Liberty versus Tyranny in the Age of Machine Empires. And before we get into this, I want to make note here. You just handed me an article that you wrote for Fox News, and if we can, we're going to bring this up on the screen as well. The title of the article, Pentagon's AI battle will help decide who controls our most powerful military tech. We are racing toward a moment in time that most people cannot even fathom, is literally not coming distantly. Right. We're seeing the beginning phases of it now, correct? In your new book, you have coined a phrase that I've caught on to, and I want to share this with the audience. You say, the new AI Cold War, the new AI Cold War. What do you mean by that?
We're going through a civilizational shift. AI is not neutral. AI is biased, subject to who basically controls it.
Right.
And that's what this book's about, Joe. It's who controls AI, and where's it going to take us? How is it transforming this world? It's going to dictate who controls truth.
Right.
It's not about nukes, it's about algorithms, and it's a terrible God. Now, that's kind of the big picture. Now, when we look at the Cold War, and I spent many years in Europe facing the Russians, I know something about nuclear weapons as well, but this infrastructure that people all over this country and abroad are dealing with regard to artificial intelligence, it's about data centers, it's about algorithms, about processors, GPUs, TCUs, all sorts of things. It's about a lot of electricity. It's about transforming who we are to understand the technology. This is more transformative, I would argue, than the railroad systems were, than electricity was, than even the digital era that we're facing. We are just at the very beginning of a transformation that 10 years from now, you'll look back and say, we didn't understand what we were getting into. This is totally transformational.
Yeah.
It's hard for me to even imagine 10 years from now, if you look at how far AI has shaped the world we're living in now, just from 3 or 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I remember when my father passed away and his book came out the next February. This was, about 3 years ago. And it was Summoning the Demon, and it was all about AI and how rapidly it was going to take over. And I remember sitting in this very chair, and I'm not kidding, you guys remember this. I remember saying, Dr. Thomas Horn had sat down with a chat bot. And I remember the crowd literally having no idea what Chat GPT even was,
Yep.
almost gasping that the great Tom Horn had talked with an AI. in part for the research for his book. Now, today, fast forward, every 8-year-old is asking their phone various AI apps by name. How do I make cookies? How do I navigate this? What should I do about this hormonal development? Hey, I heard a word at school. What does that mean? They're turning to it for companionship, leadership, mentorship.
Yeah.
This is just in the last 3 years. So when you say 10 years from now, I'm thinking if the Lord tarries, it's a reality that is probably so accelerated from the one we can even picture. I can't even picture it.
You had mentioned that it will tell us what truth is. It will define truth. That is happening now.
Yeah.
On certain platforms, you can hit a button and it will tell you whether or not the post you just saw is true.
We had talked about this for some time. I mean, we were warning about this, and of course, Tom was, really in the lead on all this when he wrote his open letter to Christian leaders about artificial intelligence and transhumanism, which they go hand in glove, and was widely mocked for it. But even just search engine algorithms shape reality. If you're a plumber and you are the 78th one on the list, you might as well not exist for somebody who's searching for a plumber in your area. But artificial intelligence, turns it up to 11, as the old joke goes. It's not an exaggeration to say that algorithms, these large language models behind Anthropic or Grok or Gemini or any of these, Copilot from Microsoft, literally defining what reality is for people who are depending on them.
Well, it's more than just so-called truth. The morphing of the technology, just in the last year, it's not hallucinating as much. It's not creating things out of whole cloth that are not believable. But we're going to new types of models. We're abandoning large language models, the ChatGPTs, the Geminis, the Groks, and so forth. We're going to energy models. We're going to AI assistants. We're going to agentic AI. And that's not too far from an artificial general intelligence or a superintelligence. We're pushing hard in that direction. The transformation is radical. The number of people in this country versus elsewhere, of course, that embraced AI, we're more skeptical. Those overseas in many places are mostly buying into this because this stuff is incredibly smart. I work with AI models frequently, and they are incredibly smart. They're capable, but they don't have conscience. They're not sentient. They can't feel. They are very knowing, and you need discernment as a biblicist to understand what this is all about. Yeah. And it is being manipulated. I was reading something, just yesterday about a conference that's coming up in the next couple of months and how it's being used by the occult. It's the Satanists. It is really driving evil in a direction that you would predict if you understand what it's all about. And so I don't know if we're in the really racing toward an end-time scenario, but this stuff is incredibly powerful.
Well, getting back to your use of the phrase, the new AI Cold War, can you frame for the audience at home what you mean by that as it applies to artificial intelligence? And then is what we're seeing today similar or different from the original Cold War?
Yeah, the original Cold War started in, arguably in 1945 when we dropped a couple bombs in Japan because nuclear fission became a real thing. And of course, the Russians jumped on that, and eventually others did. And it was a contest as to who can make the most powerful nuclear weapons and therefore going to dominate the world through intimidation and so forth. Now, we figured out how not, at least up to this point, to destroy one another. We do a reasonably good job on the side, but we never got to that point up to 2026. Now, AI is arguably far more powerful, and I say that somewhat hesitantly because, we're building a new infrastructure. We're building an infrastructure that is more powerful ultimately because of what it does than even the nuclear weapons. Where I come from in Northern Virginia, we're fighting the data centers. We're fighting because it's increasing my electricity. It's robbing my water. Well, this is becoming the heartbeat of, really the future because every single system is going to be tethered in one way or another to artificial intelligence. It's going to tell how the local utilities are used. It's going to tell us how our government is functioning, and it's going to tell whether or not we get the right health care based upon, the interest of the general population. The military, the article that you mentioned that I have in Fox News today, Joe, Anthropic refused the Pentagon. They don't want it used against violation of privacy, Fourth Amendment rights in the general population, and they don't want it to be used on autonomous weapons. We use AI for drones in attacking Iran. The Russians use AI, and the Ukrainians use AI for their drones. The number of people that are killed in the East today are about 70 to 80% are killed by drones that are AI controlled. And that's only in the last couple of years. It's gone from maybe 10% to 70 to 80%. The same thing I would argue is true with the drones that we used against the Iranians. Israelis do the same thing. Others. The Chinese are really into this stuff. So it's transforming your financial markets, exploration, agriculture, medicine is just phenomenal what it can do. When I listen to Elon Musk, Eric Schmidt, Sam Altman, all of the so-called gurus that are foisting this infrastructure on us, they are saying very dramatic things about the future of AI because they see it getting smarter, more capable every single day, and it has. It is going to radically transform our life. So that's why when I talk in Christian audiences, especially in churches, I say, pastors, you need to wake up. This is dangerous stuff, but it's a tool. If you use the tool with biblical discernment, then you're going to be able to do what is necessary. If you don't, then your flock is going to be led in a very, very wrong direction.
That's right.
Such a good point.
One of the choke points for AI are rare earth metals. So the places where you can get those, even though we have some here in the United States, a lot of them come from Africa. And I know that China has been, with their New Belt and Road initiative, that they have been going to various countries that have a lot of these rare earth metals and saying, we know you don't have any money. We will build the infrastructure for you, and then you can pay us back as you can. And of course, the country can't pay them back, which means that China owns it.
Sure. Yeah. The reason I hesitated there is because the silicon wafers that make up GPUs, which are really the brains of data centers, we're imprinting them using ultraviolet light, and billions of transistors are imprinted there. That doesn't require rare earth metals. What rare earth metals nexus with AI is that they go into magnets, they go into the generators that power the GPUs, and certain elements go into the actual manufacturing of GPUs. But the fact that the things that dictate AI are a lot of these material things, the GPUs, which are complex and only made by NVIDIA and some places like Taiwan. The Chinese are not very good at this. And then, of course, all the power, all the water, all the other infrastructure you have to have. So you have to have all of these pieces in order to make it work. And if you don't, it's not going to work. But the trillions, literal trillions of dollars pouring into this, means that every piece of this is going to be employed in the future in ways that are going to radically transform absolutely every aspect of our life.
Why is China, by many, perceived to be kind of at the center of this whole AI emergence? And what do you think their end game really is?
Well, their end game is global control. They want to promote their totalitarian ideology across the world. We mentioned previously was that they have a lock on most rare earth metals. Of course, Trump and so forth trying to change that. That's why we're talking Greenland. That's why we're talking Eastern Ukraine and so forth. However, China is using its DeepSeek, GPT, and so forth, and they're sending it out open source. What that means, basically, they're giving it away free. Well, why do you give away something free? Well, you go to Belt and Road Initiative. Why do you give away money at a cheap discount so you can leverage it for political reasons? Well, they do that with this internet, DeepSeek, and others, K2 and so forth. they give them, and then they all of a sudden, after time, people are hooked on those particular algorithms, those particular faces of AI. And they're doing that throughout Africa, throughout the Middle East, throughout certainly Oceania and elsewhere. So this is a major competition. If you're going to do that and you're going to tie it to your own ideology, which the Chinese do, then you really are facing a choice, either tyranny, overseen by Beijing, or freedom, at least at this point, overseen by the United States and the West and so forth. Now, at some point, my concern is the technology is going to blend, and we in the West are going to lose our freedoms if we're not very careful.
So that brings me to my next question. Where do you think Russia fits into all this? And rogue states like Iran and North Korea. I mean, it seems like the whole world is in some kind of an arms race with AI. They're all clamoring to be the first one with the biggest and the baddest version of it, so that, again, they have more power. Maybe they can use it as equity to trade or leverage. Where do you think they fit in?
Well, they all have a piece. The Russians and Vladimir Putin are trying to survive, and they use it to manipulate. They obviously use it on the battlefield. They use it to control their own population through surveillance and other mechanisms. The likes of rogue regimes, such as North Korea, Iran, and others, it really gives them more power to their punch. All you have to do is understand how to use this stuff, and then it expands the influence that you can have, either through misinformation,
right,
or weaponization of this in certain sectors, or through other means and modes. It is very pervasive. It's very effective. If you can develop it for your own advantage, you do. And it manipulates the financial markets. It manipulates even production of agricultural goods and manufacturing, competition. The reason I wrote 3 books, that's about 500 pages.
It's a big one.
The first book answers the question, the one that came out last year, Joe, AI for Mankind's Future, answers what is AI? And I could add a few chapters because of the last number of months. That one answers the question, who controls it?
Right.
And the people that control it, I don't trust for the most part. It's the Zuckerbergs, the Schmidts, the Altmans of the world. If you listen to them, and I do, and you read what they write, and I do, you've come to the conclusion they don't know Christ like I do. They have very, very different aims with what they're developing. So we have to take that into account. And as a result, it's not as easy to say, Chinese bad, Russians maybe worse, but Meta or Google, they're in competition with the bad characters in the world, because they want us to embrace an agenda that is radically different from the one our founders put in place, much less radically different than the Word of God.
Absolutely.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we want to remind you that Skywatch TV is a viewer-supported ministry, and right now, when you partner with us, your support not only helps us stay on the air, it also enables us to continue the mission through our networks and digital platforms, reach areas of the world with the gospel of Jesus Christ that are unable to support us financially. Right now, while supplies last, for your donation of only $45 or more, we're not only going to send you the new AI Cold War, Liberty versus Tyranny in the Age of Machine Empires, but we're also going to send you Lieutenant Colonel Robert Maginnis' best-selling books, AI for Mankind's Future, A Christian Perspective on the High-Tech Revolution, and the incredibly patriotic Give Me Liberty, Not Marxism. These amazing works, sold separately, hold a retail value of over $65. Yours now for your donation of only $45 or more, which includes free shipping to all U.S. addresses. So again, your support helps Skywatch TV continue reaching the world with the gospel of Jesus Christ. You can scan the QR code on your screen using the camera app on your phone for instant access to this special opportunity. You can also visit us at skywatchtvstore.com or call 1-844-750-4985 and ask for the AI Cold War special offer right now.
Bob, one of the things I find really interesting is the dominance of Taiwan in the global semiconductor market. It's almost like Semiconductors have replaced oil as the coin of the realm. How vulnerable is Taiwan? I know we've taken some steps here in the United States to try to move some of that manufacturing here. And what are the odds that China, looking at their demographic decline, will try to move against Taiwan sooner rather than later? How will that affect things?
Well, President Xi will move before he ends his term in office, I would say within the next 2 years. Assuming that China doesn't lose all capability because we've cut off their oil from Venezuela and Iran and so forth, which is problematic for him. But he's gone through a recent coup of his top leadership that didn't want to endorse an invasion on Taiwan. And so the military, I think the PLA will probably line up with Xi. And they've been practicing, and over the last year, we've seen a very significant increase in the number of operations that are basically planning an amphibious and an air assault. Taiwan produces arguably up to 90% of the world's chips. And of course, those are the brains that are critical for AI, and China, of course, has no difference between their public and their government in terms of production capability. They fuse everything, and so they're not going to put any guardrails that would prevent the use of AI for the purpose of killing drones or doing whatever. It's Katie bar the door, we'll do what we need to do to win. And I'm hoping we never get to that point, but I'm very concerned that we have people in Washington that are of the same mindset. So yes, we are bringing chip production here. Not enough, not fast enough. Chinese are trying to do it. We have tariffs against them. They have sanctions here and there. The world will have an inexhaustible demand for the technology going forward. That's why you have these giant places in Texas and certainly in Louisiana, where I live in Northern Virginia. These things are just popping up all over. They're consuming, by 2030, 10% of our electrical power. And that's why President Trump says, Meta, if you go into this area, you're going to build your own generator. We're talking maybe 150 megawatts of consumption all the time. It's consuming more than many cities would of electricity. And of course, it's using the same amount of water the entire population in the United States consumes on an annual basis what it takes to cool these places. And so, this is a major infrastructure investment. China is doing its bit to challenge everything that we're doing. But the world is coming to the point in which we have, battling AIs. And we try to go after theirs. We try to implant malware. We try to disrupt it. And there are certain things I talk about on how you do that. But every country, you're seeing these things pop up in the Middle East. And of course, you're having alignment in the world. You're either subscribing to what the totalitarians of China want to do, and therefore you use their algorithms, or you're aligning yourself with the U.S. and the West. And then, of course, there are other entities that are out there. So this is, I wish it was as simple as the old Cold War. It's not.
Yeah.
I have a very quick question for you. I know we're running out of time, but why do you frame this as a values war? And what effect does that have on our democracies?
Well, if you're in Beijing, you want people to bow to your totalitarian ways. They don't like our freedoms of speech, our, obviously the right to bear arms, or freedom from raids, or privacy denial and so forth. They just don't like that, and so they have their own ideology, and they're using that ideology through AI. You embed within the algorithm, what is right and wrong, and so if it's right to do whatever President Xi says, then you're going to get strokes. You're going to have social credits. You're going to be able to buy and sell. Maybe we can talk about Revelation 13. So that in the West, unfortunately, we're relying upon non-government entities to write the algorithms, and we don't know who those authors are, and they embed certain values within what they're writing, and so that comes out in very unexpected ways that are very damaging, I would argue, to our society. So you have that, and you enter from a spiritual perspective with discernment. Who do you trust? It's coming to the point, because of disinformation and you know, the manipulation of just about every aspect of media, that you just don't know if there's anything out there that you can trust any longer.
Yeah, that's right.
And that's why I always go back and say, okay, the church has got to help us understand how serious this is, and transformative and formative. It's treating us as data points, and it
That's
wants
right.
to manipulate us
right.
in ways that are very, very dangerous for our future, much less our spiritual lives.
No, that's right.
Yep.
Oh, that's right.
Yep.
I believe that's why right now we need to pray for the discernment of the Holy Spirit, which is more accurate, more truthful, and far more powerful than ChatGPT, any of the other algorithms out there. AI holds no candle to the power of the Holy Spirit that we were equipped with from on high.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, we sit here and we struggle with these network times, 28 minutes, to try to get off of our chest the totality of something that resides in a book like this. It just simply cannot be done. Fortunately, Bob Maginnis will be back next week to talk about whether or not we're already building a digital Tower of Babel. It's not an episode you're going to want to miss. Friends, trust me, get your copy right away of the new AI Cold War, Liberty versus Tyranny in the Age of Machine Empires. Give a copy to a pastor friend of yours.
Yeah.
Lead a small Bible group in your home with a copy.
Yeah.
This is what you need to understand about the times that we're living in and where we are headed eminently. Unfortunately, we're all out of time. For everybody here in studio, everybody up here on panel, Bob, thank you so much for being back with us again this week. I'm Joe Ardis Horn. Keep your eyes on the prize, which is Jesus Christ. We'll be back.
Oh my goodness, you caught one.
Look at that little tiny fish. I caught one.
Another one. You're famous now, Sugar. You're doing good.